Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all well and staying safe on this Friday afternoon. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, definitely let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Masayu and Rob and Wade, Umacorn, Cody, Jack. Great to see all of you. David. Awesome. So another masterclass is upon us. Masterclass number 85. And today we're going to be talking a lot about animation and micro interactions. Hey, Cornell, great to see you as well. So let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. We're going to dive straight into things. And before we really dive into some of the micro interactions that I was planning, I received a tweet last night at almost midnight. I was sound asleep, but Ahmed sent me this tweet around midnight last night, my time, probably a little bit earlier in the morning, his time, or I don't know, sometime that wasn't midnight, probably. He's trying to replicate the exact screen for Instagram Reels. Some of you may be familiar with Reels. I'll show you an example in just a moment. And he was wondering how to drag, from one screen to another screen and have the video continue to play. So, one screen, it'll play a video, drag to the second screen, and then the new video will continue to play. So we're going to dive into that before we get into some micro interactions, but we will be incorporating some of those micro interactions into this example as well. Now, if you're not familiar with Instagram Reels, it's a kind of a low quality example from Instagram's website itself, but you can kind of see what it is. It's very much like TikTok or some other platforms that, it's a short form videos, takes up the whole screen. There are some interactions on the right-hand side, but you can swipe up to go to the next video, swipe down to go to the previous one. And I'll show you a more higher quality screenshot in just a moment. So let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD. Before we get into some of the other examples, let's start off with this Instagram Reel use case. So I'm going to go ahead and choose let's go for the iPhone 13 Pro, Max, or whatever all these numbers are. There's so many different sizes these days. And as a reminder, if anyone has questions throughout this stream for me about design, XD, whatever it might be, definitely throw it in the chat. I will be taking a quick peek from time to time. All right, so we have our artboard, and I'm going to go ahead and drag in an example. I took a screenshot of an Instagram Reel. So it looks kind of like this, right? So you have more or less a full screen video on mobile. In this case, it's an iPhone. And, you have a few different options. You can go back. You can, I believe this icon up here is to create your own reel or take a video. Some information down here at the bottom about the user. And then over to the right, you have some different interactions to like, comment, share, more. And then there is this music. In this case, there was a soundtrack added to it, so it shows which artist and what song is currently playing. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to replicate the Instagram Reel experience, and then I'm going to show you how you can transition to different reels in this particular case. So let's start with the video. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, shortcut key R, drag one out across this artboard. And let me change the color so we can see what we're working with. The color itself doesn't really matter because we're going to be dragging a video into it in just a moment. So we've got our rectangle. Stephen is saying, is this live or a replay? It could be either, Stephen. It could be either. I could be very intelligent and I could have predicted that at this very moment, you would ask this very question and I could be responding to it in the past. You never know. No, it's live. All right, so we have our rectangle. Now I'm going to go ahead and hop over to Finder, and we have some videos that we're going to be popping into here. Now, because this is more of a vertical format, I'm going to grab, let's say, this video right here, and boop, pop it into place. Perfect. Now, what we're going to want to do is, for this first video, we're going to want to make sure to double click into it. And if you can take a look in the layers panel, we have our object mask created. This will be video 1. I'm going to select the video, and then over within the properties inspector to the right, I want to make sure that we have it set to play automatically. Now, we can go into the video heads-up display and adjust some other settings. We can, preview the video, turn audio on or off if there is audio. We can also trim the video, and we can loop the video as well, which we do want to do in this case because, well, possibly. Do we want to do that? Maybe we don't want to do that, because I think on Instagram Reels, if you're on the actual Reels page where you discover Reels, it plays the video back, and then once it gets to the end, it goes to the next video, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. All right, Howard moonlights as a comedian, I swear. I try to get a little bit funny from time to time. Half the time it doesn't work, but maybe that one was kind of funny. Who knows? All right. So we have our first video. Now, before we start adding additional videos and all this other fun stuff, what we're going to do is we're going to work on some of these interactions, the heart, the comment, share, that sort of fun stuff. So I'm going to actually do this inside of the object mask so that everything is nicely contained with this particular video. And it'll also make it much easier when we get to the point where we want to create another video. So inside of this object mask, we're going to start with the heart interaction. Now, we can, of course, go to something like Nucleo or a plugin like the Icons for Design plugin and search for something like heart, right? Lots of different hearts we can use in this project. Or some of you may know this, some of you may not. There's a little bit of an Easter egg. I believe this is the only Easter egg in Adobe XD to my knowledge. If you grab the polygon tool, shortcut key Y, I'm going to draw out a polygon. Let's go about that large there, right? And then inside of the properties inspector to the right, where we control the number of sides, the roundness, the star radius, and all that fun stuff. In the sides text field, we're going to enter less than 3 and then press return. And now we have a heart. Magic, right? All right, now for this one, we're going to turn off the fill and we're going to set a white border. We'll increase the size a little bit. We can play around with the roundness if we wanted to, but I think that looks pretty good. Yep, that could work. And then underneath this, we're going to add in the amount of likes. So in this case, we'll just copy this 288. I don't know exactly what typeface Instagram uses for their interface. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll do something like Avenir next. It's a pretty safe, simple typeface. We'll set it at around demi bold, make it a little bit smaller. And there we go. I'm going to make sure to center it. All right, so we have our heart in place. Everything is looking pretty good. I'm going to make sure to also group these two elements. This will be called heart. And then down below, we might want our comment, right? So in here, now we don't have any sort of Easter egg to add a comment icon, but we can hop over to Icons for Design. And let's look up something like either chat or message. Ooh, there we go. The feather icon for message looks pretty fancy. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. I'm going to change that to white. Now this is a border-based icon, so I can very easily, if I needed to, oops, let's make sure to put this in here. Well, I can't because it's an object mask. There we go. And if I needed to, I can always adjust the border size. And I can also flip this if I wanted to make it a little bit closer to Instagram's, but let's just leave it at that. And then we'll put 20. Perfect. All right, now we probably don't need the send icon, but it should be pretty simple to make. So let's go ahead very quickly, and that should do. Another feather icon. Right about there. Perfect. All right, Drew says Comic Sans for the win. I mean, maybe. Maybe. All right, now to make my life a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, actually we also have these little menu at the bottom. All right, let's just go ahead and create all this fun stuff. So we have our little menu icon. This one's pretty simple. 1, 2, and 3. That'll do. And then we also have the album at the bottom as well. We'll get to that in just a moment. But what I want to do is grab all of these elements. So the likes, the hearts, the comments, all that fun stuff. I'm gonna place them all into a group and I'm gonna call this, let's call this action, or actions, plural. And then over to the right in the properties inspector, I'm gonna turn a stack on, which is going to define it as a vertical stack since all the items inside of this particular group are laid out vertically, top to bottom or bottom to top. And then what's nice about that is I can dive in here and adjust the spacing all at once, let's say about 32. I can also, if needed, very easily just swap the position of these elements, just like that. But that looks, I think these are a little bit larger than the ones on Instagram, but that's totally fine. We're not looking for perfect scale here. And that menu icon is definitely way too big. It's also not really centered. There we go. That'll do. Do we want to go through and make these a bit smaller? Maybe. Maybe we'll do that very quickly. That might be too small, but that's okay. All right, so we've got everything looking pretty good. The text size doesn't make any sense right now. Let's do 10 and 10. I'm just rolling with things today, aren't I? All right, not perfect by any stretch, but we're gonna run with it. All right, so we have our actions looking pretty good. Now, one thing we can do while we're working on these actions is we can possibly create a little bit of a micro interaction for the like experience. And to do that, what we'll want to do is create a large component with the heart and also whatever interaction we're going with. Now, because we're going to be adding in basically a heart animation that's going to be appearing right in the middle of this screen here, we might want to turn off the, I'm going to adjust the spacing a little bit. We might want to turn off the stack of this group because it's once we drag in the animation, it's going to mess with it a little bit. So I'm going to turn the stack off for now. And what I'll want to do is select this heart, right? I can also select the text as well. And then over within the properties inspector to the right, I can press the plus button to create a component. Boop, just like that, right? Or you can use the Command or Control K shortcut. I almost forgot what shortcut it was. So what we want to do here is we're pretty happy with how this looks. You know, we don't want to really, you don't need to make any changes to this particular state. But what we do want to do is make the next state where the animation is actually going to kick off. So back within the properties inspector, I'm going to press the plus button and create a new state. And this is going to be called liked. And there are a few things we want to do here. One, we want to fill in this heart because when you like something on pretty much any platform, the heart or the thumbs up, it changes in some way. And in this case, we can keep it simple by just filling it in with white, or if we wanted to, we can also choose some sort of red. But what I will note is, depending on what's behind this interaction, using a color like red may be a little bit difficult to see in some situations. I mean, you can argue that white would be difficult to see in some situations as well, but I find that white might be a bit of a safer bet. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to bump this up as well to 289. Cornell says, love these pop-up tool tips. You should create more of these. Yes, I do have a few more lying around somewhere. I have one for duplicate. I have one for, I think I have one for repeat grid as well. But I do want to make a few more so that, you know, depending on the shortcut, what would be really cool, and I've been trying to figure out how to do this, is, you know, if a streaming software or some sort of software on my computer would recognize what I'm saying. So if I say something like Command or Control R, it would automatically trigger so I don't have to press the button. I know it's first world problems, but that'd be really cool if it just hears what I'm saying, the shortcut, and it just automatically triggers that visual. That'd be kind of neat. All right, so we've gone ahead and created our default state and our liked state, right? Now, let's just for now wire this up. So in prototype mode, I'm going to click on the handle to the right, and then I want to make sure that the trigger is set to tap, and then we're going to have a transition, simple transition, going to our liked state. And we don't need any sort of animation, we'll just have it basically cut, right? So if I press play, we have this, and then we can click on our heart to go to the next state. And we can also do the same process backwards. So click and then go back to the default state. Rob says, I can't read today. Gotta automate the boop. Yes, I agree as well. Will be really, because I usually do it when I press repeat grid within design mode right up here. So there could be it's probably a way to do this somehow. But if I press that, it'll automate from Stream Deck and just run that command. That'd be kind of neat. Anyways, so we have our heart. I can like, and then I can go back. But what would be really cool is when the heart is initially pressed, right in the middle of the screen, I would love to have a nice animation of a heart kind of like exploding or pulsing or whatever it might be. You know, we've all been on, many of us have been on Instagram, we double tap a photo or a reel or whatever, and some sort of animation happens, or just, you know, a heart appears and it kind of goes away. That's kind of what I want. So what we want to do is, inside of the liked state, right, where it transitions to the solid heart, we want to place our animation right in the center. Now, there are a few ways to get this animation. Of course, you can make your own in something like After Effects, or you can make a simple one in XD, or you can use a Lottie file, and that's what we're going to do. So back in my plugins, I'm going to go to the Lottie Files plugin, which is right here. You can also download Lottie files on lottiefiles.com, or there's many places you can grab Lottie files as well. We'll search for something like heart. And there's a few this one's pretty good, and this one's kind of nice. It has some like exploding elements to it, which looks interesting. And again, we want to make sure that we are inside of this liked state, right? Heart, and I'm going to grab the heart animation that we found and drag it right in here. That looks pretty fancy. Now for this one, we may have to get a little bit creative with this, because the heart starts at, you know, it starts visible. Where if we go for something like this one here, it actually starts invisible, which is kind of what we want. And let me just play this just so I can see. Okay, that could work, right? Let's run with that. Position in the center. Now, of course, the downside of using an animation that starts invisible is you can't see it too much, right? You can't see it at all at the beginning because it starts as a blank frame. So, you know, pros and cons, right? But anyways, what we want to do is with this Lottie animation in place, there's some crackling of the mic. I'm noticing that from time to time. I don't know exactly what's causing it, but I have noticed that. But sounds good on Unicorn's side, sounds good on Wade's side. It might be something with my settings. I'll have to mess with that, but I have heard that from some of the past replays. All right, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that inside the Properties Inspector, with that Lottie animation selected, Play Automatically is chosen, and we do not want it to loop. Otherwise, that heart animation is going to just keep looping and looping and looping and just be a little bit weird, right? So with that in place, we're going to go back to our default state, and we're going to press play. And now when we press the heart, woo! There we go, right? And we can go back, of course, and then we can do it one more time. Fancy. Now, of course, the video, which we did not have set to loop, ended right there. And eventually we're going to get to the point where we're going to transition it to another state. Now, there are other things on the Instagram Reels example that we could go ahead and add in there, but I think maybe we'll just add that album artwork at the bottom just to wrap this up. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. We'll round out the corners a little bit. I'm gonna make sure all this stuff is nice and centered. There we go. And I wanna make sure that we have the right, oh yeah, that's right. I took off the stack. I'm wondering why the stack is not working, but I took the stack off. That would explain a lot. All right, do I have any photos that I can use for the album? Probably not at my disposal, but that's okay. We can just change it to a random color. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good. I think we're gonna run with this and then move on. So we have our actions set up on the right-hand side. Now, the big thing about this particular example is being able to transition to another video. Now, since we've already done the work in creating this first video, what we can do is create the second one pretty simply. And we could, use a component. We could just duplicate this if we wanted to. Let's try a component, just so that if we did want to make changes to everything inside of this particular object mask, we can very easily just edit that main component. Now, because we have this heart animation as a component as well, once I created a component from this larger element, the heart animation is going to be converted into an instance. So if I want to make changes to the overall heart animation, I'd have to make sure to edit the main component. So definitely keep that in mind if you are working with nested components. All right, so we have our first video, and now we want a second video. So I'm going to duplicate this component, and I'll call this video 2. And on this one, which we're going to move in just a moment, I'm going to hop over to Finder one more time, and I want to make sure that I'm inside of here. There we go. I'm going to replace that video just by dragging it over top. Now, for this video, which is not going to be the one that's going to be playing initially, we want to make sure that the playback is set to no playback inside of the properties inspector over here to the right. That way we don't have two videos competing against each other to play, right? Now, if you are familiar with Instagram Reels or you saw the example earlier, basically the way it's set up is that the second video is down at the bottom. The first video is up here playing, and then you would swipe up to get to the second video. Now, if I were to grab this component and just place it down here, it's actually going to pop itself onto the artboard because technically I moved it outside of the artboard's bounds. So XD noticed that and figured, okay, well, he moved it outside of the artboard. I'm going to put it onto the pasteboard. But in some cases, you may not necessarily want that. So one way of getting around that is just to place these elements into a group with something that will always be on the artboard. So if I select both of these videos inside of the layers panel, group them, Command and Control G, I'll call this videos. And now if I take that second video and place it basically anywhere, it could be all the way down here on the artboard, on the pasteboard, but I'll just place it right here. It's not going to go onto the pasteboard because it's inside of a group with another element, in this case, video 1, that is still on this artboard, which is great. All right, so we have our video 2 in place, looking pretty good, and we have video 1. What we want to do now is set up that interaction so we can swipe to the second video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this first artboard, Command and Control D, and here what we'll want to do is dive into this group, select both of these videos, and drag up. So we have video 2 active inside of the artboard bounds, and video 1 we moved up outside of the artboard bounds, right? Now, if I were to simply wire this up right now, which let's go ahead and do in prototype mode, I'm going to make sure to select video 1. Actually, this is a good time to talk about drag triggers a little bit. What some people might do is they may just select anything, like the overall group, and then set up a handle from the group itself over to the second artboard. Now, in this case, that may not be the best idea, it may not work at all, because when a drag trigger is set up and you launch the preview and you try to drag something, XD is going to look at the next artboard, the wired up artboard, and try to figure out if that element has moved. And if it has, it'll be able to drag. But in this case, the video or the group itself will not move, but the elements inside of it will move. So what we'll want is we'll want to select the actual video and then drag the handle over to the second artboard, and then make sure to set the trigger to drag instead of tap, which will automatically choose the auto animate type, and that should do it. Easing options really don't come into play for drag triggers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to launch this and we're going to go ahead and drag, right? But you're going to notice when I get to the next artboard, nothing happens. What's going on, right? And that's because we purposely set it up so that on this first artboard, we have this video playing automatically. but we have the second video with no playback. And again, that's so that the videos aren't competing against each other and giving you unexpected results. So in that case, what we want to do is go over to the second artboard and basically flip that process. So this video here, which was the second, we're going to set to play automatically. And then we're going to set the first video to no playback. Right? Drew says selecting the group might work. The bounds are different between artboards. It might, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I just found it, we can try it, but I found it's a little bit, makes a little bit more sense to select the actual object that's going to move versus the overall group, which could give you some weird unexpected results. So now that we've gone through and set up those playback options, we're going to play one more time. And then we can drag, right? And then bam. So once we get to the second artboard, it respects the new playback options that we set up, and it automatically started playing. Now, of course, we don't have a third one, so the video just ended. Of course, we could have it loop like I showed earlier, but that looks pretty good. So one more time, I can go ahead and like this. Oops. I think I broke it, but then we can drag, and then we have our second video. Now, one more thing I mentioned a little bit earlier is the ability to have it automatically transition after the video playback is complete. So if I go over to prototype mode and I find the video, which is right over here, right? We have a time trigger linked to that video, and this automatically allows the video to play when the artboard loads. But what we want is we also want to set up a transition to take place automatically after the video finishes playing back. This also works with Lottie animations as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this handle on the plus button to add a second interaction. And then over within the properties inspector, we're going to use the end of playback trigger, which is available on videos and Lottie animations. And what we'll want is we'll want to set up auto animate going over to the second artboard. And we'll do something like ease in, out, and maybe let's try 0.4 seconds. And if we launch and we just let this video play back, once it gets to the end, it'll automatically go to the beginning. And we can do the same thing going this way as well. So we can find that time trigger, end of playback, we can choose our first artboard so that when this one also finishes playing back, we can have it go back to the first if we did want that constant cycle, right? Alrighty. So that's a little bit about how to create an Instagram reel style experience. Now, one other thing that Ahmed was asking in one of our other replies is, we can very easily set up a drag trigger from this artboard to the next, right? But what if we wanted to set up a drag trigger from this artboard back to this one? But if we also had a third screen, we might want to go in both directions. Now, unfortunately, there's no easy way to do drag triggers in both directions. But one thing I recommended is a little bit of a workaround. What you can do is essentially set up invisible hotspots. So, you might have a rectangle maybe at the top. And this would be invisible. So I'm just going to drop it a little bit so we can see it. And then you might have one at the bottom, right? And you can use the one at the bottom to go to the third artboard with a drag trigger, and then the one at the top to go back. So you can just drag this down, or you can drag this one up, right? It's not ideal, of course, but if you do need drag triggers in both directions, you can certainly kind of fake it like that. You can also do it, horizontally. So you can do one on this side and then one on this side. So one of them would go one way, the other one would go the other way. So that's something you can definitely do. All right, so we're gonna move on from this example. And what we're gonna do next is, okay, let's do this one. So here's another experience I have been working on. And you can kind of see my process throughout. And there are a lot of other artboards that I have on another document, but I started with a mobile design, and I'm going to definitely continue with mobile at some point. But I kind of worked my way through this got to this and then moved on to this. Then I decided to make it a little bit darker and I got to this. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Still don't know exactly which direction I'm going with this experience, but it's, you know, a maps or navigation experience for either a car or desktop or tablet or whatever it might be. But I might want to make a few different micro interactions for this screen. And one thing that'd be kind of cool is if I launch the preview, it's very static. Nothing really moves, right? And it'd be kind of nice to have this location icon just pulse a little bit. And that's another opportunity to bring in some Lottie animations. So if I dive into this group here, let me hide the static assets that I have now and hop back into the Lottie Files plugin. I'll look up something like Pulse, and we have some animations that we can be using. We have this one here, which isn't bad. That one's kind of nice, actually. This one's not bad. Let's drag, I think it was this one, right? Yep, let's drag this one in. Make it a bit smaller so that it matches. Something like that. And I'm also going to make sure it is behind the existing icon. There we go. And for this one, because we do want the animation to continuously play back, we're going to make sure to have it set to play automatically. And also we're going to make sure that it loops. So now if I launch the preview one more time, you'll notice we just have this very subtle animation that just constantly loops, right? And what's kind of cool is Lottie animations can also be set with blend modes. So if you really wanted it to blend with the background a little bit, you can change it to something like, you know, color dodge, right? Or soft light. And you're noticing it changes in real time as I am applying these. So the screen will be a little bit lighter. Of course, multiply will be much darker. You might not be able to see it very much. So I would just say something like color dodge or screen would look pretty nice, right? And there we go. Just kind of sits there and just pulses and just kind of adds a nice little something to the experience, right? Alrighty. Cornell is saying, is there any way to keep the heart filled between reels and animation? So I don't believe there is unless you purposely set that up. So on the second screen, actually, if I go back over here, if I know I'm going to, you know, like this animation here, what I can do is on this one, I can dive in here and set the component to liked. But I don't believe it automatically does that. All right, so we have this music player down here at the bottom. And in terms of very simple micro interactions, one thing we might want to do is just have this icon here switch from play to pause, right? So if I take a look at my very messy layers panel, we do have this icon here. And what I might want is, I'm going to create a component just like that. And so this will be the pause state. It's probably fine as our default. And I'm going to press the plus button and create, in this case, we'll create a toggle state because there really will only be two different states for this component. And ideally you would toggle between, pause and play, right? So I'm going to do that. Bruce is asking, are Lottie animations only in XD? I believe that XD is the only design tool that natively accepts, I could be wrong, but I believe it's the only one that natively accepts Lottie animations. There are some other tools that have Lottie sort of that convert it into GIFs or some other format, but all the Lottie animations in XD are native Lottie files. And we just added a support for Lottie files in design specs as well, so you can mark those for export. All right, so we have our toggle state and we have our icon. And I want to, do we want to have a little bit of fun with this? Maybe. Will this work? I don't know. Probably it won't. It probably won't work the way I'm envisioning it. Few things in life do, right? Maybe it will work, but it probably won't. Although it could potentially work. It's probably not going to look as nice as I thought. No, that looks absolutely terrible. I mean, it's not bad when you look at it from far away and maybe you squint a little bit. Hisham is asking, how can I get this map? So The map itself, this one here, I generated using Snazzy Maps. I think it's snazzymaps.com, and I applied a little bit of a blend mode just to blend it with the background a little bit. And you can, Snazzy Maps is kind of cool. You can customize the color of the map, all the different aspects. You can turn on or off text, and all sorts of different things. So I generated a few different maps to see which would work best. I actually have them somewhere in Finder. So you can kind of see the different options that I was working with, right? And then this one over here, I licensed from Adobe Stock, and I think this one over here as well. All right. So where were we? Yeah, this is not the nicest looking icon, but maybe it'll maybe we can do something with it, right? Maybe, possibly. I don't know. But the reason I was, altering the existing icon, again, it's not the nicest thing in the world, is so that we can maybe have a little bit of animation. So again, on this state, this is our play button. So the music is not playing, right? This is going to initiate the play. So we can maybe just, rotate this around a little bit. Oh, I missed one. Rotate this around a little bit. Just because, right? And then we have our default state and we have our toggle state. And then, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's also not the greatest thing in the world. I'm sure if I spent a little bit more time finessing that icon, it could potentially turn into something interesting, right? Let's see, maybe I can move this inwards a little bit. Did I get the right one? Yeah, okay. Move that inwards a little bit, just so we don't have that weird bump. Almost. I don't know. It's okay. It's not great, but it's kind of fun, right? A little bit of a spinning effect, and the icon kind of transforms into something. Anyway, speaking of transforming, one other thing we can do on this particular screen is right here at the top right-hand corner, we have this area, we have a search icon, right? But what we want to do is we might want to have this kind of expand into a larger search field. So let's do that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create a component from this, but we're going to make a few changes to the default state, which will help us in our next state. So I'm going to create a component, and ideally what would happen is, this would maybe go all the way out to here possibly, and the icon would go all the way over here, and then it would say something like search destinations. Did I spell that right? Destinations, yes. Friends and more, right? This would obviously have to be left aligned, something like that. And it looks okay, right? But we want to be able to get to that second state and have a little bit of animation happen. So it just has a little bit of a fun experience. Now, of course, I'm going to copy this for a second. The initial state is very collapsed. And if we were to have our text, it kind of doesn't really, I suppose we can place it off the artboard, but then when the transition's happening, we're going to see this weird awkward movement where it kind of comes onto the artboard, and then we're going to see it over here. It's going to look a bit strange. So instead, what we can do is we can use a mask. So I'm going to select the container that I'm using. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to make sure to place the container on top of all the other objects. I'm going to select all of them, and then mask with shape, which is under the object menu, or Command and Control Shift and M. So it's going to take everything that was underneath that object at the top and place it all into the mask, right? And this will allow me to very subtly move this text off, just like that, right? Perfect. So now, if I go ahead, just like we did with the other examples, I can create a new state. In this case, we can continue with our toggle state. And I'm going to dive in here. And not only do I want to select the container like I did before and make that larger, but I also want to select the mask. Because if I were to select just the container and then launch the preview, it doesn't look like much has changed, right? Because the mask is still constraining everything inside of that little square. So we want to select the container and the mask, drag it over to the right, and then we'll select the icon and the text and drag that over as well. Perfect. All right. And if we wanted to create a little bit of a staggering feel, on the default state, we can actually take the text and move it all the way over if we wanted to. So now I can press play at the top. It's a bit fast, right? One more time, and I can collapse it as well. But I mean, I say it's a bit fast, but in reality, you don't want your micro interactions to be very slow, because users are going to be sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen, right? So if you do want to slow it down a little bit, inside of prototype mode, we can see the wire that was automatically created for our toggle state. That's what it's called. And we have our easing options. Maybe I'll just switch it to ease in out, and maybe I'll bump it to 0.4 seconds. Very subtle, but right, it's a bit of a difference. Slight difference, but it's there, right? Now, one other thing we might want to add to this interaction. It may not be necessary, but when this enlarges and expands, we may want to really focus on this particular element, which means the background might have to be darkened a touch. So inside of the toggle state, we don't necessarily need to add it to the initial state, but inside of the toggle state, we might want to add that overlay. Now, we have a mask set up. So what we're going to have to do is make sure that the mask expands across the entire artboard, or at least the area where we want the overlay to be visible. So I want to make sure to select the mask. I'm going to drag this out. And then I can actually duplicate this, move it down. Let's set it to a nice dark color. Take off all these styles and maybe just darken this a little bit. Now, ideally, we would probably have this. Let me actually just bring this out a touch. I'll just fill it full screen. And then ideally, we would have this navigation area over here to the left on top. Where did our search go? I lost my search. Nope, that's not it. That's the other search. Where did it go? Oh, it's down here. Aha, that's better, right? And let's see, so maybe I'll drop it just a little bit more so we can see some of that map in the background, maybe about 70%. So again, we have our default state and we have our toggle state. And if I press play, that could work. A little bit funky with the animation, right? Especially as that mask was enlarging. Trying to figure out what's going on there. Something happened. Oh, you know what? Actually, what it could be. Let me change this to overlay. It could be that. There we go. It was a naming problem. What I had was I had 3 different layers that were named container. So I had the one at the back, which is the overlay named container. I had the actual container of the search bar named container, and I had the mask named container. Now the mask doesn't really matter because that's kind of its own thing. The one at the very top of an object mask is sort of a separate layer. But these 2 layers, which are both named container, were kind of fighting against each other. So XD got a little bit confused. But once I changed the name, let's do it one more time. That could work, right? Is it necessary? Possibly not. But sometimes adding little micro interactions to your projects just brings joy to everyone's life, right? All right. I'm going to definitely continue working on this experience, but I do want to move on to another experience, which I have somewhere right here. So you may have remembered, some of you, a few months ago, possibly, I uploaded this, which is an animated emoji picker. And this was possible thanks to Lottie animations as well. So I want to show you, I've had a lot of questions on how to create something like this. I have covered it previously, but I want to show you how to create this one more time. Wade says, always a great question. Is it necessary? 99.9% of the time, if you have to ask yourself that question, the answer is probably no. Now, that's not statistically correct or scientifically correct. It's probably less than 99.9% of the time, but let's be real with ourselves as designers. Most of the time, these very elaborate interactions, nobody cares. Except us as designers, right? Because we like to have some fun. But if you're posting something on Dribbble just to get some likes, then add all the micro interactions and all the interactions and all the everything, right? But if you're designing for a real world experience, may not be necessary. Actually, ideally, what we should probably do is just get rid of the animation. So transition, no animation, maybe a dissolve possibly, right? That's all you really need. You just need a very simple cut. Maybe we can do a dissolve, very simple dissolve, 0.2 seconds. Boop. That's all. It does the job, right? The majority of people, I'm pretty confident in this, the majority of people who are using an experience to do something, in this case, let's say search, they don't care about these fancy animations. They just want to press a button and they want to search, which is exactly what they want to do, right? And if your animations are too slow or they're too fast or they're distracting or they don't work, if they glitch, then it's going to give them a bad user experience. So this is probably all you need, right? If we're being real. All right, so speaking of probably unnecessary animations, we have emoji pickers. So over here, we've got this little emoji icon, right? And what I'd love to do is either hover over this or, click on it and, hey, Tanya, great to see you. And I would love to see some animated emojis. So what I'm going to do is, we have about 10 minutes to pull this off, right? Let's start by designing the actual emoji picker. So we'll do something simple like this rounded Cornell's saying, Dribbble is like Mafia. If you join it, there's no way out. I mean, honestly, I know there's a lot of people who have mixed opinions on Dribbble and all these different platforms, but it's a wonderful way, especially if you're getting into freelance. It's a great way to find work. I don't take on freelance work, but I have a lot of people contacting me on Dribbble that they want me to work on X and Y project because they like some of the work. And I have a lot of friends who get the majority of their work through platforms like Dribbble and Behance. So it's a wonderful place if you just kind of ignore a lot of the fluff that designers post that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, you all know what I mean. I post stuff all the time that in the real world probably isn't necessary, but on Dribbble and other platforms, it looks pretty fancy. All right, so we have our container, and let me just style this a little bit. I'm gonna have to definitely move this above. Where's the chat? Here we go. Actually, you know what? Let's make this outside of here. There we go. We may not set up the hover effect today because we may not have some time, but let's go ahead and just add a bit of color in here. I'm going to add a border so it separates it a little bit. Maybe I'll add a bit of a drop shadow, very subtle drop shadow. Let's try 8 and 16. Maybe I'll bump it down a little bit more. Wade says, we like fancy. There's nothing wrong with fancy from time to time. It's just we have to be, as designers, we have to be not only communicative with our engineers, but we also have to be real once in a while, right? Or more often than not. And we have to ask ourselves the question we've been asking ourselves all day, is it necessary? Again, most of the time, probably not. All right, so we have our lovely container. And then inside of here, we want our emojis. So if I go ahead and let's draw out a square to house my first emoji. And I did license some wonderful emojis from UI8.net. And you can't really see the preview here, but here's a preview. Oh, OneDrive updated to work with the new Mac OS update, and you can't preview things. It's very frustrating. Anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and let's go for the laughing emoji. And these are all Lottie files, so you can't really see a preview here. But I'm going to pop that in there, and there is the emoji, right? So with any Lottie animations, you can dive in and you can set the playback, just like with videos. So play automatically. We will have this loop. And then I'm going to duplicate this one. We can also place it into a stack and a group and all that fun stuff. Stack, and then duplicate. Oops. You know what I should do is, and then, so 12, I guess. And then duplicate, there we go. And next one we will do maybe sad. And sleeping, sure. And then we'll do one more, maybe silly, right? There we go. So all of these should be set to play automatically, and they are set to loop. So now if I press play, look at these little, hey, you know, the sad one's kind of sad. I'm going to change that one. There was an angry one that was kind of fun. Actually, there was like a, where was it? Aha, the cussing one. Look at those little guys. Aren't they just cute? I can just stare at that all day. Wade says, all excess animations with real little function, but just for fun. Function over fun is definitely something we have to consider, right? All right. And then on top of this, we may want to highlight. So we might want something like this to let users know what exactly this reaction is. And I'll use the polygon. Flip that around. Maybe I'll round out those corners just, not that much, just a little bit. And then I'll round this out a little bit as well. I'll select both of these and I will combine them just like that. And then in terms of color, we can get a little bit creative with this one. Maybe we can do a, do you want to do a gradient? Maybe we can do a subtle gradient. Something like that. And then laughing. I'm not sure what typeface I was using here. Oops, I keep missing it. New Cabell, new Cobble, new something. I'm just gonna go for Avenir next. It'll do. Maybe I'll bold it a little bit. Howard didn't see the first part of that statement. I need an animated emoji. I mean, things like emojis are probably okay, but some things you know, just not necessary. But emojis, animate all of the emojis, right? Yeah, it could do, right? Now, of course, you know, one thing that we can do is, I don't know if we're going to have time for this, but we have this little laughing guy, right? Or laughing tag. I'm going to group this. Is we can actually set up components for each of the emojis. So I'm going to copy this for a second and just delete it. But inside of here, on each of these, what I can do is create a component and then create a hover state for these components. So inside of the hover state, I'm going to paste this. Now I do have a padding and stacking set up, so I'm actually going to very quickly just turn that off. And then inside of the hover state, paste that. So we have default state, hover state, and there we go, right? Now, of course, inside of the hover state, we also have to make sure that the animation is set to play automatically. And we probably don't need any sort of animation here. So I'm going to just switch this over to transition with no animation. And there we go, right? We've got our little laughing doodad and these lovely animations as well. Now, there were a few other use cases that I did not get to today, so maybe we'll do a few more micro interactions next week or the week after. But that's going to wrap things up for me for today. Big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few moments, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.